Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Elam Road podcast, where on today's show we're going to be going over Derby Day defeat at the Gtech. Fulham do the double over Brentford this season. We're also going to talk about the FA Cup final on Saturday, which kind of, in a way, already confirmed our fate this season. There is a very slim chance, Dan, a very, very slim chance. We're going to get into that, but first, how are you?
I'm not buying that. I'm back to being negative now. But apart from the football, I'm all good. I think it would have definitely felt worse, I think, on Sunday if City had won the FA Cup and if we had known with certainty that 8th place gets Europe.
Yeah, I think that. Do you think that came into the players' kind of minds at all? Just before we kind of get onto anything, just a bit of a prenup. Do you think that played into it a little bit because they knew that it wasn't as on as it was before?
I think it must do. Especially, it was a really weird situation, not knowing until the day before the game how big the game actually is. And you don't get those situations very often. And I think as fans, we all watched it. We all wanted City to win. And we probably all felt quite low after that game. And I find it very hard to believe, as much as players might say they're, avoiding all the noise and only focusing on what they can do. I heard Thomas Frank watched the game with a Palace supporting friend. So that must have been a fun place to be for him on Saturday evening. I just don't think the players can avoid it. I think they would have watched the FA Cup final, or they probably would have watched it anyway because they all like their football. But I think they had to be a tinge of disappointment. But actually, I thought the game was a more lively game and a more lively atmosphere at the Gtech as well than I thought it probably would have been after a result on Saturday.
We'll break it down, but first remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts around the Fulham game. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. We'll talk about Saturday first because I think we did that full podcast with Sam Tabuto, from the Hounslow Herald, kind of looking back at the season, and we kind of really bigged it up to something what was going to be something really special come the end. And looking back in retrospect now, we probably shouldn't have fucking done that podcast because on Saturday, obviously Palace lift the FA Cup trophy, beating Man City in the final, which made it a long shot on Sunday anyway. What were your emotions like watching that Palace game, Dan?
Well, I went round to my parents to watch it, and yeah, I was gutted at the end. I wasn't even sure that there was still a chance at the end because these permutations are so confusing. Even on the BBC coverage, they put a graphic up to say that Chelsea can still come 6th. That's not really the case because then Newcastle have to come 7th, and I can't see that happening. It's also confusing. It's gutting. I know for several weeks, this was the game that I was most worried about. More so than any of our games. You in the group chats were quite certain it looked like that City would win, but it's not the same City this season. And even before the game, I looked at their lineup and I thought, okay, they're going for it. They've got a lot of attacking players in there, but who's like playing this Rodri role? I know he's missing, but there's nobody in that City side who was going to play it. It was almost like Kevin De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva were the two sitting midfielders. And I think from that moment onwards, it didn't surprise me that they maybe had most of the ball and they were trying to break them down. But it didn't surprise me at all that when Palace got on the break, that they were able to, go on those transitions so easily, because who's breaking up the play in the middle of the park? Yeah. And it was really frustrating watching Manchester City. I can't watch that every week. They were just constantly horseshoeing it from left to right. Didn't particularly like they was going to score in the second half.
I thought that there was a Nico O'Reilly chance where he doesn't pull the trigger. He's trying to get it back onto his favoured left foot, and I just thought as the half went on, there were a couple of half chances here and there. But you are right; there were no clear cut chances. But
I think
watching the first not like this. They're not going to dominate possession like they have done and not create anything of note. Which is why I was up until about 80 minutes. I was like, "Come on, they're going to get a goal. They're going to get a goal," and it just never came.
I think there was a sense it wasn't meant to be, because obviously I think Henderson should have got sent off. Yeah. I think if Henderson's not there, or if Henderson doesn't touch the ball, Haaland gets there and he scores 9 times out of 10. The keeper's out of position. Their justification, and it was Jared Gillett, by the way, who was the referee for the Fulham game, and on VAR, I believe, for the Ipswich game last week, when a couple of our players, they got rugby tackled in the box.
He hates Brentford.
Yeah, Jared Gillett conspiracy.
Wasn't
But
he also the ref that sent off? No, not sent off. Yeah, no, not gave us a penalty against Bournemouth in the playoff semi-final in the Championship. I want to say that's
he
right.
was the referee. Yeah, yeah, he was.
Yeah,
He
he
was
was.
referee
Yeah,
that
yeah,
day.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was. Yeah.
So maybe he hates Bournemouth even more. But he hates those European teams that are going for eighth spot. Put it that way. But I think that's a red card for Henderson. I think the only reason the ball's going in the opposite direction is because Henderson punches it there. And I don't think the defender would be getting across in time for Haaland to tap it into an empty net. And I don't think for any moment that Haaland won't get there at all. You know, he's a big, quick guy. I think he would get on the end of that. And then obviously the penalty. And the moment Haaland passed it to Marmoush, I didn't have a good feeling about it. We've obviously not had a very good record with penalties this weekend. I was thinking to myself, well, if only Bryan played for Man City and could take that penalty. And then he goes and misses one himself the next day. So I think there was a sense, maybe they did have some chances in the second half, but I think by that point I was just sensing the fact that it wasn't their day. And I'm happy for Crystal Palace. I mean, it's a sign, and hopefully we watch that, and Thomas Frank sees that,
Yeah.
and realizes that it is possible for a club like Brentford, for a club like Palace, and the amount of emotion you saw from the Palace fans not winning anything before. You know, if Brentford weren't involved in the permutations of it all, I think we would have all wanted Palace to win that game. And I think they deserve it. And just seeing how happy everyone was, I hope that inspires Thomas Frank to dream and maybe take these competitions a little bit more seriously in terms of his lineups next season.
I think it was just like it was such a bizarre watch because you're right. Everyone that isn't a Brentford, Bournemouth, Brighton, or Fulham fan would have been watching that game wanting Crystal Palace to win. I was working the game and everyone in the office was just like cheering on Palace at every opportunity. And then what made it even weirder was that post full time, every single group chat was like, "Is it still on? Is it still on?" There was like pictures flying about, people saying that it's completely off. There was like an Instagram post from like a football data account that went into one of our mates' group chats, and everyone was like trying to figure out whether it was still on or not. But I think
It's
moving
way
on
too
to
confusing, all that, isn't it? All these
it is
permutations way too confusing. I'm sure on Match of the Day, about a week before this final, they said, or they showed a graphic which basically said that if City don't win the FA Cup, it's not on. And then now all of a sudden there's all these permutations. It might be on, but I'm not sure it's on for us after yesterday, unfortunately.
I mean, Liverpool play Brighton and Bournemouth, I want to say, go to Spurs before they play
City in midweek.
City, yeah, but Bournemouth go to City before they play Leicester on the final day. Liverpool are playing Brighton tonight. We're recording this Monday morning, and the Bournemouth game is on Tuesday night. So I think it's definitely out of our hands now. And obviously, I think the result on Saturday softened the blow from Sunday. But speaking of Sunday, initial thoughts from that Derby Day defeat?
Like I said, it was a more lively game than I thought. And the crowd are more lively than I thought. I know it's Fulham, but we had that 0-0 at the end of last season where it was a bit of a dead rubber and it just never really got going last season. I thought we might see something a bit similar. I agree with Thomas Frank to an extent that on another day we win that. Obviously, 2 of the goals were deflected crosses. We did create chances. On another day, Bryan scores a penalty and we have a bit more to defend. But I think the manner in which we threw it away in just a few second half minutes is really disappointing and quite painful after what happened earlier this season at Fulham as well. But, you know, Fulham broke their record Premier League points total by winning this game. We're still a point above them. And we're not even going to break our record Premier League points total this season. I don't think we can now. I don't think we can get as many points as we did 2 years ago. So it just shows that the achievements that we've had in these last few years, Fulham have had many more years in the Premier League than us, and dating back to the early 2000s as well. So we've got to put things in perspective. I would be really disappointed if we don't end above Fulham now. I think we've got to get a result next week. I believe Fulham play City as well, actually, next weekend. We can't rely on City. I don't want to be relying on City anymore. So let's go do the job next week, finish as high as possible and end above Fulham. But it's disappointing. Of course it is, in the manner that it happened in. It's a bit of a shame as well. I was one of those that stayed for the end of season lap of honour. Thomas Frank doing his usual few words on the microphone. It's a bit of a shame that there weren't too many people there. I understand why. Emotions are high. I don't even think, you know, a lot of the players or Thomas Frank necessarily wanted to be there in that moment, especially after a defeat. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame that we ended off at home that way, but in another way, it was a typical Gtech game. We just weren't on the right side of it this time.
I think that'd be a good point to wrap up the podcast. The Ealing Road podcast we've had. I'm joking. Let's talk about some. But before that, right? There's been a lot of Fulham QPR chat, and there might be a few Fulham fans watching this podcast, right? Because there was on the last one, all tuning in for the tears, which is exactly what I would do, by the way. If we beat Fulham, I would go to the Fulhamish pod, I would comment, I would troll, I would do the same things. But the way they go on, right? For a club, and this applies to QPR as well, the way they go on about how much they don't care about Brentford, and then they milk the shit out of these wins against us. It's just, could we just accept that we are league rivals, right? And there is no Chelsea are our main rivals. Chelsea don't give a fuck about Fulham and QPR. They don't care. I'm not having it. That's all I'm saying. So all these Fulham fans, all these tweets that they've done from their social media accounts, yes, I am rattled. It pisses me off. But just stop the act. Can I just? Yeah?
I think when rivalries can change over time, right? There was a time when we were in League One, League Two. They were in the Premier League, and of course, then we didn't really see much of each other. That there wasn't much between the sides. We never really played each other. But I think it can change when the team from next door rises up. And it's kind of similar to the Manchester derby. I'm sure Man United fans now care a lot more about Manchester City, since they've won everything and almost overtaken them. And since we've come up to the Championship, they came down. Obviously, we beat them on that Easter Monday or Easter Friday, wherever it was, all those years ago. I think there is a rivalry between the clubs now. We're beating each other quite often. We get on top of them. I want to say it's their first double on us in quite a while. And I think Thomas Frank again said in his post-match speech that if we end above them this season, it'll be 4 out of 5 seasons or 3 out of 4 seasons that we've ended above them in the table. So I don't buy that. That there's not a rivalry between us. We have earned our place where we are. Fulham are also a decent side. The reason that there is a rivalry is because we're pushing up the table together.
Level,
and we had happened to both be in West London and next door. So I agree. Chelsea fans don't care about them. Chelsea have had the odd season. They've had the odd season when they've ended below us a couple of years ago as well. But really, they compete on another level. I think us and Fulham, we are the two sides in West London who are mostly well matched, and it's quite a good competitive rivalry that we've both got on top of at different stages in recent times.
Just a final point. QPR jumping on the bandwagon for that Brentford B game against their development squad in the Premier League Cup. Like, come on, you celebrating that? What game?
A couple of first teamers they had in there. We didn't have Ramel Donovan.
I know,
biggest star of the B team.
Honestly, travesty. Anyway, there's lots of chat about Mark Fleck, and we'll go through the game a little bit. I wish we had Craig here to kind of address the criticism that he's had over the last kind of couple of days. I think mostly for the first goal. And I think something that you saw, that Jimenez's opener and Norgard's header in the second half was similar kind of saves for both goalkeepers to make. I know the ball wasn't necessarily in the same place, but in terms of getting down fast and getting an arm out, Flecken kind of gets down fast enough, but the arm isn't strong enough, whereas Leno does both and kind of prevents that goal. What have you made of the criticism? Because it's almost like for Flecken, he makes that big save against Ipswich, and then he's back in the spotlight the following week, and people are saying we need to get rid, we need to sell. And the pelters that he's got, I think, is over the top, because I do think he's improved a lot. But it kind of comes back to that conversation that we had about the drop off from David Raya being so steep that he was never going to quite live up to that kind of standard that Raya set. But what have you made of the criticism?
I think it's a bit harsh. I don't think that was an obvious error at all. It would have been a very, very good save, as Leno's one was in the second half. I think, if Leno doesn't save that, we're not all looking at Leno and thinking, oh, that was a massive mistake from the Fulham keeper there. The goal on the whole is a bit fortunate from Fulham's side. There's a deflection. And obviously Collins doesn't really get off the ground either to challenge Jimenez. Could he challenge a bit more? I think if we're going to be criticising Flecken for that, Collins needs to take a bit more responsibility as well. But ultimately, I think it's just a bit fortunate with where the ball lands. A good header. It's a shame that he gets so close to it. I think it almost looks worse that he got so close to it, and it kind of seemed to go under him. but I wouldn't necessarily blame him for that. I know I saw again for the second, or definitely the third, possibly the second as well. He didn't really move Flecken, and it's not a good look again. But Wilson's shot
it just
was in
makes
the
it look
corner.
worse. That's the thing with
Yeah,
when he doesn't move, it just makes it look worse. But
yeah.
people latch onto that, and I think it's a bit unfair. But yeah, Bryan gets the immediate equaliser, and I think it was deserved because we did start that half and kind of the whole first half. I think Thomas Frank said we were completely on top, and it was one of our best halves of football all season long. Maybe a little bit hyperbolic from Thomas Frank there, but I definitely think we were the better team in the first half. Then we go ahead. Yarmo creates the penalty with kind of utilising Kevin Schade pace, because it didn't look for the life of me that he was going to get anywhere near that ball, but just turns on the afterburners and gets to the ball before Anderson. He then trips him up. And then we have probably the seminal moment of the game. Bryan was 11 for 11 in the Prem before the pen. But to be honest, it's not his best moment.
No, it would have been a record. It would have been a Premier League record, I believe, if he had scored 12 out of 12. Because Palmer missed the other month, and I think he was on 12 out of 12. So I think Bryan would have been the outright highest player to score 100% of his penalties. No, it wasn't. It was a good height for the keeper. It wasn't fully in the corner. Obviously, he got away with one earlier this season against Crystal Palace. So really, it's the second one he's missed. I think it's a little bit too casual at times, that penalty technique. Unless you're watching exactly where the keeper goes and you're very good at putting it in the other corner.
Like Tony.
Yeah, I don't think he quite does that as well as Tony.
Yeah.
And then I think if the keeper guesses right, it can be a little bit too casual. It's not quite in the corner as maybe it should be. But honestly, I thought the penalty itself might have been a bit soft. I don't think there was a lot of contact.
I think there's he catches his foot, which I think triggers Schade to go down. But yeah, no, if it was given against us.
What I thought should have been given is I thought Tete should have been sent off.
Wissa. Yeah.
Wissa perhaps too, but I think Tete initially, obviously he got the yellow card, then he made another foul, and I thought he was lucky to get away with that there, and I'm surprised Fulham didn't take him off. Wissa, perhaps, I don't think it was as clear cut, but I think, if you're not sending Tete off, you're not sending Wissa off. But I do think Tete perhaps should have got sent off in that first half.
We'll talk about the Wissa one, because I think that's probably, and then the thing with the Wissa one, we'll get onto it. First of all, another long throw and another goal, our sixth from long throws this season, I want to say, but someone maybe fact check me in the comments. Bryan and Wissa now up to 19 each for the season. We talk about these guys every week, Dan, but result aside, kind of season aside, to have two players on 19 goals apiece is ridiculous, I think, for a team of Brentford stature.
Yeah, and I love a long throw as well. Let's just add that in there again. I think perhaps it could have been Norgard's goal. I'm not sure Wissa needed to touch that one, but Wissa, 19 goals, no penalties in there. And if you look at the top scorers in the Premier League, I think he's up there actually, almost on the same as your Haalands, your Isaks, if you take out penalties. So that's absolutely brilliant. I agree that maybe obviously Bryan gets the penalties, but I think he doesn't get as many tap-ins as perhaps Wissa does. Wissa's often in the right place at the right time. And he does get a few of those, but that's brilliant. And if both of them can score again in the same game, which they do so often, they did here at Wolves, then we'd have had 3 players in the Premier League era all getting 20 goals in a season after Ivan Toney a couple of years ago. So I hope they both do it. Bit sad if it is the last time we see them together next week, and this was the last time we saw them at the Gtech together. And I do get the feeling it will be at least one of them. So I think we just need to enjoy them while we can for 1 week, and it will be a good way to round it off for them both to get 20. And obviously Bryan could have got 20 here, but if they can both score again next week, that'd be great.
2-minute spell in the second half sees Fulham turn it around in, like you said, similar fashion to the reverse fixture. First Tom Kearney, and then that I've got a choice word in the running order here, but I'm not going to use it because it might upset a few people. But I'm going to use rat instead. That rat Harry Wilson, who I never want to see playing against Brentford again. I hope he leaves Fulham in the summer because he's really got it out for us. But I think if we're going to be hypercritical, there's too much space around the box for both goals. I think the second one in particular, I know that Thomas Frank is happy to kind of let shots come in from long range because he's confident that Flecken's going to make the save. But I do think Schade possibly can do more on the edge of the box to kind of stop that shot.
I think when you know who it is, when
Yeah.
I understand, certain players and certain teams, but when opposition, and there's a few of them around, you think of someone like Tielemans as well at Aston Villa, when there are certain players on the ball, we've got to get closer to them because we know what they're capable of pulling off. And Ciso, another one at Ipswich, you need to watch certain players, I think. And Harry Wilson is one of those players who will have a go and quite often will score spectacular goals. So I think we do need to be more wary of specific threats, and we should have planned that in the week. If Harry Wilson comes on, we've got to get tighter to him than we would somebody else because we know what he's capable of. And obviously the second one, it was a deflected cross again. It wasn't even a particularly good cross, this one. But before it was deflected, it's unfortunate. I thought Keane Lewis Potter on that left-hand side did struggle with these crosses. I think when it was Adama in the first half, maybe he's a bit more reluctant to get tighter to him because of his pace. And obviously everyone knows what he can do. I think maybe he's a bit afraid of getting beaten in behind. So he maybe stood off him a bit and allowed him more space to put those crosses in. But I thought this was probably one of the games where he struggled a bit more at left back. I don't think he was able to go forward as much as he wanted as well. Perhaps also due to being wary of Adama going the other way, because there was one occasion I think where he picked up a yellow card where Adama got ahead of him and you're not catching him if he's ahead of you. So I thought this is one of the games that he could perhaps learn from still. I mean, it's still in his first season being a left back.
Just on sort of shooting from outside the box, and it's probably a bad example to use because I think the Wissa pen shout comes from a point where Norgard is on the edge of the box, and I was watching it, I was just thinking, just hit it. You're in a good position. Just he's got a good strike. Just hit it. You're close enough to goal for you to know that it's going to be on target. But like I say, it's a bad example to use because we actually get a decent chance from the following cross. But is that something you want to? I know that our whole thing this season is get the balls into central areas, get high XG chances, and we have like the best kind of turnover, or I'm not sure what the stat quite is, or the conversion rate of high quality chances. Brentford are like an anomaly in terms of the rest of the league because we're so high, or the conversion rate is so high. But it kind of showed a contrast. You got someone like Marco Silva and Thomas Frank, two contrasting styles. There's obviously no kind of instruction from Marco Silva to say, if you're in that position, Harry Wilson, don't shoot. Whereas I would sometimes, and we saw it in the reverse fixture with Yehor shooting from outside the box and scoring an absolute thundercunt. But I actually have just said that word. I actually have just said that word that was in the running order. But I would like maybe for them to just have a go from outside the box sometimes, because I feel like we do have some players that have got some nice ball striking ability.
I agree. Harry Wilson would be terrible in a Brentford shirt because all he would be able to do is pass it along the edge of the box. I agree to an extent. I think it would definitely make voting for the goal of the season a bit easier because I found that really hard this year. I thought a lot of the goals are very similar that we had to choose between. I agree to an extent. I mean, there's certain games. I remember that Burnley game a couple of years ago where all the goals seem to be from miles out, but it's very rare. And it can be a bit frustrating at times, particularly during periods in a game where we're struggling to create or when we're not getting enough efforts on goal. I think maybe there should be a bit more freedom in those scenarios where we're finding chances a bit harder to come by, to just have a go now and then, because it does sometimes come off. We've got players who quality who can do it. Someone like Bryan, sometimes when he cuts inside from further out, he's more than capable of curling something in the top corner. But you also understand why we don't, because 9 times out of 10 we work it into a better position, and we perhaps will get a better chance out of that. But it can be a frustrating watch sometimes, a little bit like City in the FA Cup final. Just
I mean, De Bruyne was trying. De Bruyne, he had a few efforts, but like he was kind of playing a quarterback role kind of towards the end of the second half. But when he got to the edge of the box, so there was one that I think deflects off the back of Lacroix's head or one of their centre halves, and it looked like it was goal bound or at least on target. But I was just thinking, if he has a sniff around the edge of the box, so like someone of his quality has every right to have a go, because that he's going to be able to hit the target and maybe test the keeper as well. But should we talk about the pen shout, Tete and Wissa? I've got mixed feelings about it, because if you slow it down, it's not a pen, but if they were looking at it in the VAR room, when you slow it down, it doesn't look like a pen because it's just like the contact is nowhere near significant enough. But at full pace, because he's gone up for the header and he gets a nudge in the back, it does obstruct him from getting to the ball. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Maybe. I mean, like I said, I think the first one was
yeah.
probably a bit soft. So maybe if you give him the first one, you give the second one as well. But it is probably one of those that the VAR is not going to overturn. Maybe the referee should be a bit more consistent in his decision making. But like I said, I think the biggest issue for me was the fact that Tete was even on the pitch, because I don't think he should have been on the pitch. I think that was the biggest thing the referee got wrong in this game.
Should we talk about the subs? Because you put it out in your post-match tweet, Rico Henry, Matthias Jensen, Igor Thiago all came on and kind of made not a significant impact on the game. I thought Rico in particular, and this isn't just like a knee-jerk reaction. I've actually thought when Rico's come on as a sub this season, I say this season, but only in the last kind of 3 or 4 games. I don't think he's looked kind of up to scratch, at least on the ball. Off the ball, he seems himself, but I actually thought maybe he's lost a yard of pace. I think the thing to kind of consider, and what you're probably going to say as well, is that none of them have played any consistent minutes at all this season. So they're all going to be kind of a bit ring rusty. But what were your thoughts on the subs?
I think we've said it in the last 4 podcasts. Even though we've been winning the games, we've had spells where our performances are dipped. Against United, obviously, I think we were 4-1 up when the subs came on. It ended up 4-3. Against Brighton, we had that really nervy period, even though they were down to 10 men when the sub came on. It's difficult because the only way they get match sharp is by playing minutes, and they're not getting regular minutes. They're not going to get regular minutes with only 1 game to go. I think the best thing for them now is just to stay fully fit, keep fit over the summer, come back, have a full pre-season, and they'll hopefully be at the same level as the other squad. I think at the moment you see the starting 11, they look sharp, that they look up to the fitness levels. I'm not saying the subs don't look unfit, but I think they do look not match sharp. And you can tell, just taking an extra second on the ball, misplacing a pass. And it's hard to do. Of course, it's hard to do in a derby when you've just gone 3-2 down. You need to come on, you need to make an impact instantly. But I think we've seen flashes from Jensen. I think Jensen again provided the cross for Norgard. And we could have been saying, another good assist from him. But we also see misplaced passes from Jensen. We also see him not quite releasing the ball quick enough, getting caught on the ball. And I think it's not necessarily something to be concerned about for the long term. But given that they've missed so many games, given that they've been injured for most of the season, it's just a shame that we've now got those options on the bench, but they're not up to the sharpness levels. And I think at this stage in the season, you're not going to get them up to the sharpness levels. So it's about next season, and it's about not going into next season with a bunch of B team players on the bench. It's about keeping people fit, not getting them injured during pre-season, but getting them up to the required levels. And hopefully then we can have a really good go from the start next season.
In terms of the players from the start and potentially the future next season, Yarmo, I thought again was our best player. You weren't on the pod last week. We spoke about him at length because he was really, really good in the win against Ipswich. But we kind of said, well, we've been saying all season we didn't really know what his best position was. But I think over the last 2 games, he's kind of consolidated, I would now say, that his role in that midfield, I think, is confirmed for next season, because he's just kind of, as the season's gone on, slowly, very slowly, and then sort of towards the end, very sharply, has looked very, very dangerous and very good on the ball, off the ball. He's got like something I think the other midfielders don't, in that he can probably do a bit of both. He's kind of a mixture of Yano and Norgard.
Yeah, he covers a lot of ground. I think he makes Norgard's job easier. I think he's a bit of an all-rounder. He's quite good at a lot of things. And yeah, he just covers so much ground. And I think when Yanelt comes back, I think he'll have a trouble getting back into the side. I think we've said it for a long time, he's a very good squad player. I think him being on the bench next season, in games where we're winning, when we want to maybe see it out, I think he's a good option to bring on. But I think at the moment that third midfield spot is his, unless we sign someone in the summer, and obviously then they might compete. But I think it's quite a well-rounded midfield with Norgard, Yarmo, and Damsgaard. So it's something I'd definitely like to see more of next season.
Any other players that you want to chat about? I've got Sharda in the running order, but anyone else?
I thought Bryan Mbeumo was bright again, despite missing the penalty. I thought he did run at players a lot. He did create chances. Unlucky, obviously, to miss the penalty. And like I said, it might be the last time we see him at the Gtech. So I think he deserves a shout out. And he didn't play, but Ben Mee, obviously leaving the club after 3 years, was a very good player in our first. I'm sure in his first season he won the Supporters Player of the Year. Obviously hasn't played so much this season, but you can imagine the influence he has behind the scenes, and it looks like he wants to carry on playing somewhere else. So good luck to him. And I think, he's been a really good servant for us over the last few years, and he's such a likable person as well to have around.
Overall thoughts, Dan, before we kind of talk about Wolves, we can kind of merge this into the same bit, really. I think finish as high as we can. Obviously, I mentioned at the top, there is a very, 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 very slim chance that 8th can still get Europe. We could potentially, by Tuesday, potentially, in asterisks, inverted commas, could go into the Wolves game knowing that we must win in order to kind of give us the best chance. Obviously, we're relying on Chelsea getting beaten by Nottingham Forest, other results as well, and also Chelsea winning the Conference League. But I think at this point in time, we're still on course for our highest ever Premier League finish. We can't get the record points total, but overall thoughts closing out the season, Wolves away, Dan.
8th sounds a lot better than 11th, and it's guaranteed that we can go into the last day with a chance of finishing 8th. And obviously, how good that chance is depends on how Bryan get on against Liverpool and how Bournemouth get on against City. On paper, it looks like, both of them could easily lose those games. But I think given the specific situations of each team, Liverpool winning the league, City being quite inconsistent coming off the back of a cup final, you never know. I think they games that could potentially go either way. Bournemouth can draw and still stay behind us. So I have some confidence that, they at least won't beat City. I'm a bit more worried about Brighton because Brighton can draw and go above us. But just end as high as possible, end above Fulham. The horrible thing is, even if we do pull off 8th and things go our way, there's still another 3 days at the end of the season before the Conference League final. And if everything was to go okay, because like you said,
I don't know if I can do another. I don't know if I can do another watch like that.
Nor do I. But it's not out of the question. The only doubt I have about Chelsea finishing second is whether Forest will beat them. I think everything else might well fall into place for that to happen. But then again, Betis in the Conference League final, if anyone's going to beat Chelsea in that competition, it will be, someone like Betis. Anthony scoring the winner. Yeah. But no, I think this season it's definitely better than the last season. Our last season was, a real struggle. I think the progress we've seen in our style of play has been the most notable change since we've been up from the Premier League. And I think that serves us really well for next season. I think, even looking at these seasons in 2 halves, I thought in the first half of the season, we had so many chaotic games. We only kept about 1 clean sheet in the first half of the season, which I think was at Everton, when we had 10 men and probably adapted how we played anyway. I think in the second half of the season, we still had the odd chaotic game, especially at the Gtech, but we have had more solid controlled games. I'm thinking Forest away, even like West Ham away when we won 1-0. We've had a few more games like that. And I think that serves us in good stead to go ahead next year and build on that again, start from where we left off, hopefully not get any injuries over the summer, hopefully recruit well, especially if someone like Bryan Mbeumo leaves. But I don't see why, if we're not in Europe, and we've got to look at it from 2 ways. If we were in Europe, I would just be saying we've just got to stay up here. But if we're not in Europe and we've got a full squad and hopefully add some depth in the summer, and we start from this point having, cemented a better playing style or a more progressive playing style to move forward with, then I don't see why next year we can't, really look to go as high as possible again. And I know we will, but, there's a realistic chance then that we can get into that European battle and hopefully stay there. I feel like this year we've just kind of come very near the end of the season into that battle. It'd be nice to have, a similar season to like Brighton have had from the start. Or Forest, if we're being more ambitious, of just, being up there from the start, sustaining that position and, having that excitement from start to finish. So I think there's a lot to be positive about. Obviously, it can change over the summer depending on what happens in terms of incomings and outgoings. But I think we will have money to spend. We've not overspent in our Premier League season so far. So I think we're in a very much healthy state to move forward in.
Brilliantly put, Dan. Couldn't have put it any better myself, mate. The Ealing Road podcast will be back after Wolves with a full-time show. Remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts around the defeat against Fulham. Can we finish the season on a high at Wolves? Let us know in the comment section down below. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Dan, a pleasure as always, mate.
Up the bees.